To me, religion teaches peace and getting along with your fellow man, and do unto others as you would have them do unto you. I have never encountered in my life a religion that teaches to hate other religions and to kill people who don't follow that religion. And by definition, one day we're going to have to come to terms with the fact that such a definition may not include this religion as practiced by too many adherents in this country and in other Western countries. It cannot stand. We will not survive if we permit people to believe that their religion is the only religion, and other religions must be annihilated, and people who practice those other religions must be converted or killed. It's incompatible with our existence. And by definition, those are not religious teachings. They are political, homicidal teachings. And one day, we're going to have a leadership with the guts to outlaw such teachings. As sure as I'm sitting here, it's coming. It has to come, or this country will disappear. I have studied the story of the great days of the Arabs. And it is one of the most amazing stories of conquest in the whole history of the human race. They smashed the Byzantine army at the Battle of Yarmouk, a tributary of the Jordan River, in 634. And I'm not going to go through the entire list of countries that they conquered. But you must understand that the Arabs conquered Persians and converted the Persians to Islam. You may not know that, but the Persians were not always Islamic. They conquered Syria. They conquered Palmyra, Antioch, Jerusalem, and converted them to Islam, or large elements of the population went over to Islam. And then the Persians went over to Egypt, I believe, and they had a great host with a great force of elephants, and they won. They conquered Persia, as I said. The Muslim Empire kept pushing into western Turkestan and pushing eastward until it met the Chinese. Egypt fell to the Muslims almost without resistance to the new conquerors, who were driven by a fanatical belief in the sufficiency of the Quran. They were ignoramuses. They read nothing. They hated the written word in any other form. And they wiped out the vestiges of the book copying industry of the Alexandria Library that they found in Egypt. They burnt it to the ground. They then poured along the north coast of Africa, and they entered the Straits of Gibraltar and Spain. The Muslim invaders invaded Spain in 710. They crossed the Pyrenees Mountains in 720. In 732, the Arab advance had reached the center of France. They threatened to take over all of France. But finally, the Arab advance was stopped for good at the Battle of Poitiers and thrust back as far as the Pyrenees again. It was only through fighting that the French retained their civilization whatsoever. Now, I don't have the time to go into these early years of the Arabs and the conquest in these 25 years, but you should know that in 25 years, the Muslim Empire expanded greatly across Persia, Persia at that time, Iran today, Arabia, Egypt, and as I said, almost conquered a good portion of Europe itself. But they didn't kill everybody. This is the interesting part. The maniacs today, the little men with beards today, are actually worse than the early Arab conquerors. These throwbacks that we're seeing today in Hezbollah, for example, are not representative of the Arab today. They're not even representative of the Arab of 1,000 years ago. Because when the Arab conquered these other countries, they didn't kill everybody. We can talk about some of the murders if you want. But we should talk about the effect upon the human mind and the general destinies in those nations. The Arab intelligence, never forget, was a great intelligence. And the Arab intelligence that entered these other countries was flung across the world even more swiftly and dramatically than the Greeks had entered 1,000 years before. They stimulated the intellect of the whole world west of China. They broke up old ideas and developed new ones, and it was an enormous advancement for mankind. In fact, when the Muslim Arab mind entered Spain, it discovered an active Jewish tradition of speculation and discussion, and it integrated, it pollinated, and they worked together. In Central Asia, the Arab mind met Buddhism and the material achievements of Chinese civilization. The Arabs learned the manufacture of paper, which made printed books possible. Who? From the Chinese. And finally, the Arabs came into contact with Indian mathematics and philosophy. And what happened as a result of these interactions was the intolerant self-sufficiency of the early days of faith, which made the Quran seem the only possible book, was dropped. And suddenly, a renaissance occurred. Learning sprang up everywhere in the footsteps of the Arab conquerors. And so by the 8th century, there was an educational organization throughout the entire Arabized world. And I'm going to pause right there. What we have here are people who are actually pre-8th century, some of them calling this show. Here they are living in the United States of America, the most advanced civilization in the world has ever known. Instead of pollinating and integrating with this world, they continued to disseminate the hatred of the 7th century. Because by the 8th century, the Arab conquerors had created educational organizations, and learning sprang up everywhere in the footsteps of these Arab conquerors. But here in America, we have throwbacks teaching the most ignorant, the most homicidal people in this country that the 7th century is the century to live in, and people who do not practice their religion are less than human, and they must either be converted or you know what else. And so we have a real problem on our hands. But again, I want to remind you that by the 9th century, learned men in the schools of Cordoba in Spain were writing and corresponding with learned men in Cairo, Baghdad, Bukhara, and Samarkand. The Jewish mind and the Arab mind assimilated very well together, and for a time the two Semitic races worked very beautifully together through the language of Arabic. They didn't kill each other. The Arabs didn't kill the Jews. And I'm talking the 9th century. In the 9th century, these throwbacks in the Palestinian world and the Hezbollah are actually a throwback beyond the 9th century, whether you know it or not. And long after the political breakup and the weakening of the Arabs, the intellectual community of the Arab-speaking world actually endured. Unfortunately, it's died by today. But it was still producing considerable results in the 13th century. But we have people in the Arab world today who are living before the 13th century, as I told you. All you have to do is study some of the history. All you have to do is look at the Museum of Alexandria that they burnt to the ground in the 7th century. All you've got to do is look at the wonderful things that the Arab mind gave the world. The clumsy Roman numerals, as you know, were thrown out by the Arabic figures that we use to this day. Many of the ignoramuses who call the show, who say that they're experts in the Quran, don't even know that the Arabic numbers that they're using replaced the Roman numerals. They don't even know who Rome was or what the Roman numerals were. The Arabs gave us the zero sign. The very name algebra is Arabic. So was the word chemistry. The names of such stars as Algol, Aldebaran, and Bootes preserved the traces of Arab conquests of astronomy in the sky. And so they reanimated the medieval philosophy of France and Italy and the whole Christian world. So the Arabs were a great contribution to world civilization. And you must understand that they also gave us very great advances. Although there was barbarism amongst them, they gave us great advances in metallurgy and technology, alloys, dyes, distilling, tinctures and essences, optical glass, were all discovered by Arab scientists. Of course, they were looking for the elixir vitae, a stimulant that would keep people living forever and prolong life indefinitely. But that's okay. That's what drove them. It drives many of us today. I understand that. The bottom line of what I'm telling you is that the Arab mind, the Muslim mind, had integrated with the world, even the worlds that it had conquered, and was getting along with them by the 8th and 9th century. And yet we have people who have called this show who are reflecting the mind of the 7th century Muslim.